Welcome to The Value in Why. We are not experts, we are simply average guys like anyone else out listening. What we hope is that by sharing our experiences, it will help promote thought in others to find answers in their own lives.
All right, Alex, you just asked me before I turned on this camera. What are we doing today? What did I tell you?
You said I was going to surprise you.
Yeah, and I said you're already prepared.
Okay.
So if you remember the other day, we were talking about the educational system.
Uh-huh.
And I said I want to do a video on it. So since we talked about that together before, that I figured that we're pretty prepped for this. So it's not too much of a hit. But some of the cool things we were talking about with the educational system is how it's backwards. And we got talking about, okay, they teach us from the backside. So, like, I don't want to go into what got us on this topic too deep, but, like, we were talking about a person I was talking with, and they were talking about the solar system, and they were talking about all those things, and leading up they started from the backward side and worked their way in. And that got us onto the topic going, wait a second, why are they coming from the backward side and coming in, where you should be starting from the inside and working its way out?
Well, why are you coming from the solution and then finding stuff to back up your solution rather than looking at what you have informationally available and then using that to designate your solution?
Exactly. And the more we talked about that, the more like we kept coming up with really good examples of how school does that. And I figured it'd make a great show to give some perspective on that, because the biggest thing that we see is that a lot of us, the reason why we ask the questions why is because a lot of times we realize that we're just given information and we're supposed to accept it. And I think that was a really good conversation we had, is realizing that, yeah, because we've accepted all these answers, we do everything in our power in order to
Defend them.
them.
No, I would tend to agree. I think in a couple of episodes I've mentioned that, I'm homeschooled, so I had a slightly different perspective than a lot of other people, but the biggest perspective that changed for me is that the number one thing my family taught me was to work out your own problems, right? They taught me how to find solutions and how to use my mind to actually work the problem, find an answer. And what I've noticed from talking to a lot of people and from my education in the Marine Corps and things like that, and from my college time, the public education system is much different. If you picture, like, let's say that you have a computer and it's having an issue and you're supposed to troubleshoot it in order to find what the problem is, all right? That's how you should work a problem. You are testing different theories, saying, hey, maybe it's this, all right, maybe it's the motherboard, maybe it's the power supply, maybe it's a low CPU, whatever the case may be. Maybe that's the issue. That's how you should work a problem, all right? Well, the educational system very oftentimes will take that and flip it on its head, and they'll say, hey, look, this is the solution. Now we're going to teach you how we came to this solution. And so they do it backwards, all right? I see this a lot in math. You will see a problem, and then they'll be like, all right, here's the problem, here's the solution. Now we're going to teach you the formula on how to get to that solution, right?
Yeah.
Now, the funny thing, and you and I talked about this the other day, is how much you are graded on how you worked the formula versus whether or not you found the solution.
Oh yeah, many times in school that I would come up with the answer, and a lot of times it'd be worked in my head. And I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this.
Oh yeah.
You turn in your paper and the teacher's like, you have to show your work. And the biggest thing they tell you is, if you do the work, they know you didn't cheat. Oh, come on now, I could have wrote down the other person's work.
Yep, that's exactly it. And I look at that as, it's folly to me, because I'm like, okay, what are you actually trying to teach me here? Are you trying to teach me how to find solutions, or are you trying to teach me a formula? All right. Now, I get it. In mathematics, we have formulas and they work. All right. And that's why they do teach that, and they want people to understand them. But on the opposite side of things, let's think about this. If someone doesn't use that formula, but they somehow find the same solution, They may have just discovered a whole new way of working that problem. And that's the issue that I have, is that they're not promoting free thinking and free thought in such a way that you can develop mankind, develop our intelligence. They're teaching you how to follow what has already been developed, and then when there's a development by somebody who's considered at a higher level, they'll start teaching it to you and you can be more advanced.
Yeah, that brings me to like when I was a kid growing up and I had math and I brought it home to my father. My father's an engineer. He does math for a living. And what was crazy was that we'd sit down and do the math and he'd have me do it a certain way. And we'd get the correct answer and I would actually turn that in and show the work that we did. Well, the teacher would have a problem because it wasn't the same way that she was teaching in the school. But it still had how I got there, and it still had the correct answer. And of course, I know many times my father was always irritated because he's like, the math that we were getting taught how to do, he was like, well, that's the long way to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, it takes longer. Here's the shorter way to do it. And he always would bring up the shorter way. And it's like, okay, there's multiple ways to get to the same answer, and the question is, why are we forced to have to use whatever the standard is, and then why would we pick the standard that's the longest?
Yeah, why would we choose something that's less efficient? I've been seeing stuff on social media and other forms of information, and how people are being taught math nowadays in comparison to how I was taught. I mean, I'm not that old. I'm 24 years old, so it wasn't that long ago that I was learning math. And it's completely different. And I'm looking at these problems and saying, you realize, there was one video where it compared a teacher showing the way to do this problem and how children are taught it nowadays versus how we were about 5-10 years ago. And the person who did the math in the formula that was used 5-10 years ago did it in about 20 seconds, all right? And then in that time, they're like making a cup of coffee and stirring in the creamer and putting in the sugar, and they're sipping on it while the teacher over here is still working on this problem for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, 20 seconds versus 2 minutes, which one's better?
Yep.
All right? Unless you can give me a reason as to why this formula over here that was faster has a flaw somewhere, in particular problems it doesn't work, there is no reason to teach me the long way.
Yep.
Now, it also brings up another interesting example, which is some people learn differently.
Yes.
All right? That's the other problem that I have, because let's take the same exact example I just gave a second ago. There are two different formulas to reach the same answer. One's faster, one's slower. All right? Someone may not be able to learn the faster version, in which case I think it's appropriate to teach them the slower version. Or someone may not be able to learn the slower version, in which case they may identify more with the faster version.
Yep.
This is the issue that I have. They're not teaching an individual to think the way that their brain naturally thinks. They're saying, this is what is socially and societally acceptable, this is what the standard is, you're going to learn it. And that's why we have a lot of people struggling in the education system, because it doesn't apply to them. They don't think that way.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of different learners out there, and they need to be able to think the way that their brain works.
Well, that's interesting you bring it up that way, because another example I have going through school is, especially, we're really on the math topic apparently right now, but in math, I always would raise my hand and ask the teacher, like, can you explain where I'm going to use this?
Mm-hmm.
And it was very important, yeah, you laugh, but it's very, very important to me to understand how to use it, because then I can comprehend the problem itself and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
When they would just give me this magical math problem, show me how to work it, I couldn't relate it to anything, so it was hard for me to grasp.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you could relate it to something, it would I could get it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found was doing like just algebra, that trying to figure out, okay, why are we doing it this way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what does that really relate to? And most of the time, the teachers teaching that could not give me a real world example.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, there's a reason why you're teaching me this. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to understand the actual problem I'm trying to solve, not this magical problem that you made up on a board.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is when I got into electronics classes, when we started dealing with flow rates and trying to figure out what the ohms are, trying to figure out what the amps are, oh, there's those A's and B's.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, the math became easy because I understood what I was trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found for me as a learner, that's the whole thing is I got to understand the concept in order to understand how to work the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't just have this mystical, here's how you work a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, like, for me, it's hard to comprehend how people can go through that system and actually learn something, because I'm like, if you don't know where you apply it, how many kids ask that question all day?
Mm-hmm.
Why do I need to go to school? Why do I need to learn
this?
And I'm like, the school doesn't ever really show you why. And like my son, he asked me the other day in the car, is why do I need to learn all this stuff? And I said, well, you don't know what job you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's something you're getting taught you're going to need in the real world. Because he asked me on something, and I said to him, well, I haven't studied that in a long time, and I said, I don't use it on a regular basis, so I'm not the most knowledgeable. And he's like, yeah, but you went through school. I said to him, you're only going to remember a third, maybe, of what you learned in all your schooling.
Yep.
And he's like, then what's the point of going? I said, because you're going to find whatever really pulls you in is what's probably the direction you're going to go after you leave school, and those skills you're going to take with you, and the rest of them you're sort of going to forget about. It's the raw truth of it. And so he was like, okay, but what if I don't like English? What if I want to write a book? And I was like, well, the greatest thing is somebody that really loves English, they're going to remember English. And I said, I can write all my thoughts down on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be perfect grammar. It doesn't have to have none of that, because I can hire the person that enjoys doing that. And I'm like, okay, I don't have to retain all that information because somebody else chose to.
Yep.
And I can pass it off to them.
Yeah.
Now we're getting a little off of where I think the topic is, but
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that you bring up a good point of purpose.
Yeah.
All right, and that's really the underlying factor of this entire discussion, which is, what is the purpose behind all of this? All right. I know that me as a kid, I would see people asking the same questions that your son was asking, or that you've asked. Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to learn this? And to me, it's actually kind of funny, because I'll be 100% honest. Growing up, there would be, I'd be interacting with kids that were in public school, and they'd be talking about stuff, and I'd be like, I didn't learn that, and I've done fine for myself, which kind of proves a point that you just mentioned, which is that you take the skills that you need, and you're going to remember those, and the rest of them you're probably going to forget. All right. I do not consider myself to be the most intelligent person, but I also don't think I'm the dumbest person out there. That being said, the skills that I have retained have a purpose to them.
yeah.
And there are a lot of people out there who don't really learn that well unless they understand that purpose, because they want more.
Yep.
They want more than just, here's the problem, here's the answer, here's how you work it, that's the end. There are some people who are fine with that. There are people out there, human calculators, who are just like, no, that's all I want. I just want this because that makes them feel safe. That makes them feel secure and like they are successful and they've achieved a lot because they understand how to work problems in life.
Yeah.
And that's fine. My issue with the way we're taught is that I feel like we are being pushed in one direction so much that the standard that's being taught in the public education system is counterintuitive to us actually advancing as a human race. All right, given an example in going through college. All right, I told you the other day, when I was writing papers in college, I found it incredible how so much of what you were writing in those papers didn't really matter in terms of your grade. It was more about, was the grammar correct? Was your spacing correct? Was your formatting correct? Did you have enough references? Did you cite them properly? All right, all these things. You were being more or less graded on the structure of your paper instead of the contents.
Yeah.
And to me, that's backwards. Because while I understand that professionally you should be able to put together a paper that looks good, and that's important.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I can take a 2-week side class to learn how to do that. What's actually important is
the content.
Is what I put in that letter. If what I put in that letter isn't worth reading, then who cares how good it looks?
Yep.
Right? And if what I put in that letter is worth reading, nobody's going to care about the grammar. Nobody's going to care about the formatting, all right? Because it's valuable information. That's the issue that I have, is that they are not focusing on the valuable information. They're not focusing on whether or not you are thinking clearly and you can express that clearly. They're thinking, hey, you need to do this particular way because that's what we're told. And the funny thing is that I don't even think the teachers and the professors are free thinking anymore either, because they're being told a certain thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've always looked at the educational system as, okay, they're making for good employees.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does a company need? Okay, if a company needs you to put something out on paper, here's the format they need.
Mm-hmm.
If a company needs you to be able to solve a math problem, here's the formula they need you to use.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is that we're taught through school to retain information and regurgitate it. And there's absolutely no thinking involved. And as a society, the further we go without thinking, okay, it's really easy for us to adopt views.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a view sounds like one that resonates with me, I'll quickly adopt it.
Mm-hmm.
And without thinking about it. And a lot of times, like I don't want to go into the topic that started us into this educational thing, but like the person I was talking to, that they were defending positions that
They had no real ground.
They were defending information that they were given.
Mm-hmm.
And they were defending it as they were truths without ever examining.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing is that that's where most of society has gone because of the way the education. And then, of course, we can pick at the news. The news does the same thing. We sit down, we watch the news tells us blah, blah, blah happened, and we take it as a truth. We don't go and verify
Do our own research.
A lot of times whenever we're dealing with these issues with our country versus another country, if you go check out the news of the other country, all of a sudden, they have a different understanding of the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how many people take the time to do that? With the technology we have today with the internet, you can do it.
And it's not hard.
It's not hard, but most of us will just take what we heard on our news on our TV as facts.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is, they can steer, and of course, you don't know what the background of the person that is giving you the information. Are they trying to steer me a certain way, or is it their lack of information, or did they choose not to look at it deeply and they just took this information and they're passing it along? And I think as a society, because of the educational system, we have sat up and we have just gone through and we just accept things.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, a lot of our channel, you'll see stuff on religious stuff, and I'm going to poke. It's the same thing I see as the church, that you have a minister that goes to seminary,
Mm-hmm.
and the only way he can be the minister of my church is if he goes to seminary.
Mm-hmm.
Not because he was led to go through his Bible and learn truths and understand it. He goes to seminary, gets a piece of paper, and so the question is, okay, how many things in seminary did they push upon him and
Ingrain with.
And so then it has a different outlook when you're looking at Scripture, because when you're looking at Scripture, okay, I'm going to poke here. If that's the Word of God, and all those, everything written in there is fully inspired and they're all truths,
Mm-hmm.
why do we have so many different denominations that can't get their head together and agree upon the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the biggest thing I have an issue with is, okay, we can look out into the world and go, how many times, if you're Baptist, I'm raised Baptist. Okay, we poke at the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And we sort of say, well, they're not really a Christian, or they're not something else because they don't believe the same we do. They're using the same book.
Yeah.
So why is it?
Yeah. Why is it different?
Why is it different? And the whole thing is that you have this standardized seminary, but what's interesting is most of the seminaries are for each of the different doctrinations.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're doing the same thing on all fronts of anything that gives us information. We just take in the information and we just regurgitate without even questioning.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to back up a little bit and and kind of talk about why this is dangerous. All right.
Okay.
So, what Tim's talking about here is somebody who has a belief. All right. It may be scientific. It may be religious. It may be, a belief that you have in mathematics. Any sort of belief that you have. It could be ethics. It could be morals. You have a belief, but you were never taught to understand or develop that belief on your own. You were just taught the belief, all right? And because you have the belief, it has become so much a part of yourself that you're willing to defend it. But because you never actually did the problem solving of your own, you never actually took a look at it for yourself to understand this belief. You were just given the belief and told to believe it. You don't know how to properly defend it because you don't know whether it's true or not. You just adopted it, all right? So that's what Tim's talking about. Now I'm going to give you a very easy example as to why the public education system is responsible for why people do this, all right? Going back to math, just because it's easy, all right? We have two formulas, two different classes for the same problem, all right? One class is taught one formula, and that's the right way to do it. The professor says, if anybody else ever tries to show you a different way, they're wrong. This is the way you're supposed to do it, all right? Same thing is taught in the other class, but with a different formula. Now, these two classes meet, and they start working problems together, and the students from the different classes are using the different formulas. All of a sudden, they butt heads, right? And then when the student asks the other student, why are you using that formula? The only response they can say is, well, that's the way I was taught. That's the way that I was told to do it, and I was told that if you did it any other way, you're wrong. All right? Because they believe their teacher, they believe their professor, they're willing to defend that formula in order to feel good about themselves, to feel superior to the other class, without having any actual way of defending themselves, because they don't understand why their teacher told them to use that formula. They don't understand that there could be flaws in this one. All right, and so that's why he adopted this one. They don't understand that maybe as a kid he didn't understand the other formula, and so he felt that these kids would probably have the same struggle as him, so he taught them this formula.
Yeah.
All right, there are a bunch of different reasons as to why he could have given them the other formula, but nobody asked that question. They were just told, this is the formula, this is how you do it another way, you're wrong. The end. All right? We're taught that in school to the point where we take that same mindset through our lives with everything else. So now we get into religion, all right, or we get into morals, we get into ethics, we get into politics, all right, and we have someone say, hey, this is the right way to do things, this is the right way to conduct business, this is the right denomination in the Christian church, this is the right moral standpoint on gun control or on abortions or whatever the case may be, all right, whatever resonates with you, like you said, you're going to adopt. But because you were never taught to ask why it resonates with you, you're never going to be able to fully defend your standpoint.
Yep.
All right? But you're going to defend it to the death. And then somebody, like Tim, is going to come along and poke holes in it, and you're going to sit there dumbfounded and not know why this person's poking holes. Because you never did your due diligence to actually study up on why you believe that. And I see this all the time, especially when people debate politics. It's funny. Because they'll go on either side of the argument on the issue, and they both have valid points. The problem is they don't understand why they're actually believing what they believe. They just believe in it because it's easy.
Yep.
It resonates with them, and that's what they go with. This is why this mentality is dangerous, because you can't actually defend yours, and you can't actually disprove theirs. So that gets us nowhere. Like I said, it is not a system that encourages or promotes free thought, free thinking, and independent improvement, which means that as a whole, our society gets dumber instead of better.
Well, I mean, when you think about the turn into the 1900s, how many innovations did we come up with?
Oh, yeah.
And where you got to draw the question is, how much schooling did we have that time?
Not as much as we do now.
Well, what I saw on TV, the prairies, they had a little schoolhouse and they went to school for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But for somehow the biggest inventions, electricity came out in the 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You had telephones, you had
everything. It was the biggest explosion. And today, all we do is improve upon those. And it's like, okay, they had less of a schooling system. How in the world did this happen? Well, I think the word you used earlier was free thinking. That they were less clouded up, and they were able to freely think. And now we just improve upon what's already there. I mean, you think about it. In the 1900s, we came up with a telephone. Well, look how much we've improved. Now we walk around with it stuck to our ear anywhere, any location. But all we did was improve upon it. And when you really look at inventions, how much have we really done
since then?
Not
a lot.
We just improve upon what's already there. And when you go further back, you go, okay, all these people, we think of the educational system as more of a new thing. And it's like, well, how did we get here? Okay, how did they figure out to make a wheel to put onto a buggy and pull it across the country to find new land? Okay, all that is an educated person, but it's actually a free thinker because they're trying to figure out solutions. And today, the only solutions that we're coming up with is how to enhance what we already have. Okay, when you think about a person that before there was a wheel, hey, I got a lot of stuff I need to move. I'm going to take it on my back one at a time. I need a solution. And we came up with a wheelbarrow or something. And the whole thing is, when you're looking like that, you really wonder that, is school really helping us? I mean, like you talk about as a dummy down, I'm sitting there going, when you look at the past, and then let's go here, okay? We talked about history a little bit on one of our last shows. That how do they move these big bricks? Okay, look at the Great Pyramids. You can look it up. We don't have a crane today that can move one of those big blocks. And they tell me that slaves figured out how to stack those up.
With hand tools.
With hand tools. And which, something I saw on the Discovery Channel, they made wooden ramps and they put wooden logs underneath these big stones, and they would push them up the ramps. Well, if you know how big the pyramids is, to get that very top one up there, that's a lot of pushing.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of pulling. And on the documentary I watched on the Discovery Channel, they say that we don't have a crane today that can lift that off the ground, one of those huge blocks. And like the huge block is bigger than a school bus, bigger than a train box, okay? Completely made of stone. How do they move that around?
Yeah.
If we don't have a crane that can do it today with pneumatics, how did a bunch of slaves move that? And putting logs underneath, how did you lift it up in the first place to get the log underneath it? I mean, and then you're going to push it up a ramp?
Up a steep pyramid.
and you know, that's the thing, that's one of the, you know, that's one of our mysteries today. We don't know how the ancients did that. And how can you say we're getting smarter?
No, you really can't. And that's just it, is that's really my point, is true intelligence. You and I were having a conversation about this the other day. The wise guy has
keep talking.
More questions than he does answers, right? So if you really want to be smart, what you have to do is you have to stop listening and start asking questions, okay? Start asking questions, start searching and looking for answers yourself. And I guarantee you your intelligence is going to increase, because here's the deal. A lot of the times when those teachers, those professors give you those short answers, it's because they don't know themselves, all right? And this is coming from someone who probably went through 8 to 10 years of college.
Keep going.
In order to educate you, all right? We're talking about someone that, higher level professors, they have a doctorate, all right? They went through 10, 12 years of college to teach you, and then you ask them questions like, well, what's the purpose of this? And they can't answer you. Okay, that tells me that I don't need to be in this system.
Yeah.
Because I'm on my way through the same system that they went through, and they can't answer my questions. If they can't answer my questions, then this isn't the right place for this solution. This isn't the right place for me to be searching for answers. I need to go somewhere else. But we're taught in society, and we punish people in society for not looking in those avenues for their solutions. Because if you don't have that piece of paper, you might not get a good job.
Yep.
If you don't pay into this system, then you're going to live in poverty forever. All right? We are taught these fear tactics to keep us.
I was going to say, you're labeling all these fears.
Mm-hmm. We're taught these fear tactics to keep us in line and continue to promote this educational system that is failing. Because more and more people have that piece of paper, have that PhD, have that bachelor's degree, have whatever it is, but more and more people aren't able to find jobs. All right? Before there was college and high school was it, if you finished all the way through high school, you were, oh wow, that was great, you had a high school diploma. And then college came around and they're like, oh hey, you know, the high school is the basic level, and if you have that, that's good. But if you have the college, wow, that's really great. Now it's becoming that college is the basic level. So that means that they're going to have to add something to the top of this pyramid and just keep growing and growing.
Well, and that's interesting with the growing and growing, because, like, one thing, my father's grandmother, so she was a wife that had 16 children that lived on a farm, and they were poor. And of course, my grandmother always told us that during the Great Depression that their family didn't feel any of it because they were already poor, and so it had no effect. But the interesting thing is about my great grandmother is when my father went to college, he got out of high school and went to college. She was a lady that you would consider non-educated.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have schooling background, but the one thing she told my father is the most unique thing ever, because I see it fulfilling today.
Mm-hmm.
She said to him that she watched from, kids were originally would go through elementary school and then they would go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then they added on going to more classes, so I guess middle school and then high school. I believe that middle school was probably not developed till after high school was developed, and it was a intermediate type thing. But she realized that over her years of watching how they kept adding more and more education, that it was causing a problem. And what she told my father was, when he went to college, was that they're going to figure out how to get everybody to go to college. And so right now they're selling the idea that go to college, get a good paying job.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, what happens when everybody chooses to go to college to get those same paying jobs? It's the same problem they had with everybody going through high school. Because before high school, you had options of not going to high school.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they put it in high school and then made it mandatory that everybody went to high school, the thing that she noticed was that they were told they would get higher paying jobs with that education, which the first wave did.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you had everybody with the same education, they
There
were
wasn't enough
able
jobs.
to lower the job pay because it was more competitive,
Mm-hmm.
and they were able to pay employees less. And then she said the same thing's going to happen with college. And what we see today, most of the general studies,
Mm-hmm.
that is absolutely the case.
Mm-hmm.
That at this point in time, the ones that really can make a good education or a good pay out of their education are the ones that are going for very high specialties that not everybody wants to achieve.
I'm talking lawyers, doctors, that kind of thing.
But then you're also talking about a lot of money for going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have the ones that are getting the lower educations. And I pause there because I don't know the proper terminology. I don't want to call it lower, but but with
they're getting a an education in a field that is in less high demand.
yeah, because there's more people doing those studies,
Mm-hmm.
and so then you're able to lower the wages because more people are willing to work for lower wages because they got to have work to pay off their student loans, pay off all these things they got into. And so the thing my great grandmother said, I watch it come true.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like my father, he got an education, has had a great job. Everything that he was sold, he's gotten. But now we're to my generation, your generation, that's not the case anymore. And it's like you said, what's the next thing they're going to roll out? Because there has to be something more.
Mm-hmm.
Because because right now we have too many people, and then we have another problem. Another problem is this, because wages have gone down, but everybody demands more wages, and the price of things keep going up. Well, let's get rid of the employee. Let's get a robot in there, because we've got to a point where we've developed the computer age that can do majority of our tasks.
Mm-hmm.
So now all of a sudden, when you think about the educational systems, like where is that going?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the question is, I don't know if it can go anywhere. Maybe that's why they're replacing us with robots.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going to have more people than there are jobs.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do then?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. And this is a little further out from the topic that we're on right now, but I think it's still pertinent to what we're talking about. I've told you this saying before, but one of my favorite sayings is a Latin saying that came from the Romans, and it's panem et circenses, all right? And it means bread and circuses, all right? So the Roman Empire, as we know, was a very, very successful empire, all right? They conquered a large majority of the world. Now, they started out and they had the working class, and they did the hard labor, they did all the skilled labor, all that kind of stuff, and they were paid well for it, all right? But what happened is that the more successful Rome became, and the further out their reach became, they started getting slaves. Now, what they would do is they would teach these slaves to do this work instead, and they wouldn't pay them, or they would pay them significantly less because they were slaves, right? So exactly what you're talking about, you got a larger crowd of people, you teach them the basic stuff, and you pay them less for it because you have a bigger pool to choose from.
Yep.
So much to the point where now the working class became the higher class, and the slaves replaced the working class, all right? So the Roman leaders realized that this was a problem, because they said, what are our citizens going to do with their time now? And so they came up with an idea of bread and circuses, or we call it bread and games, all right? And so they said, we can't pay all these people because they're not doing work, but they are citizens and they need to be taken care of, otherwise they're going to take action against us. We're responsible for them. And we also want to have something to occupy their time so that they don't get out of hand. So they gave them bread, and they gave them games. They decided, hey, as long as we have the bodies to do this labor, there's no reason why our citizens can't eat, all right? That's called socialism, all right? You're out there saying, hey, these people are going to do the work, and you're going to eat because of it, all right? Because we have enough people that we can support ourselves as a whole, which on the ground floor sounds great. Then they said, well, we can't just feed our citizens. I'm sure they'll be happy with that for a time, but we need to occupy their time so that they don't get unruly and they don't start riots and they don't start striking out against us. So they gave them games. That's where the gladiatorial arenas came from, all right? What they would do is they would feed their citizens, and then they would stick them in these arenas so that they could watch slaves fight to the death, so that they would have entertainment to occupy their time. This worked for a while, but eventually they got bored, all right? And as soon as the citizens got bored, they realized they wanted something more out of life. They wanted to go back to work. They wanted to do things with their hands again. They realized they needed purpose. And the Roman society began to collapse because a lot of these people, these citizens, would turn to becoming rogues and brigands and bandits and things like that because they wanted something exciting. They wanted to go do what it was that they were being shown, but they were told they weren't supposed to do.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the Roman Empire started to decline until it eventually collapsed. All right, the Roman Empire actually destroyed itself.
Yeah.
And I look at America, and I see a lot of the same thing, because we think about welfare.
Yep.
All right, we think about food stamps, which I believe all has a purpose, and there's a place for it. We look at how much less we're getting paid for the education level that we're at, and they're talking about, you know, introducing a minimum salary that every United States citizen gets paid just so that they can eat, because they don't want us to starve, because we have the infrastructure to do it, so why not?
Yeah.
they're talking about introducing that, and then I see, you know, all the social media and stuff that we have, and I'm like, there's your games.
Yep.
All right? There's your technology, your thing to occupy your time. But guess what? That's not going to last forever.
Nope.
Because eventually someone's going to wake up, they're going to step outside their door, and they're going to say, what am I doing with my life?
Yep.
And as funny as it sounds, it all comes down to the fact that they were told to believe in something, but because they didn't understand it, they didn't realize the direction that it was going to take them, and now they don't know where they're at.
Yep. I think that's probably a pretty good place to close this episode.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point, especially like looking at the technology. It's sitting there to occupy us, and we're using it to take away our jobs. So it looks
It's kind of a double threat there.
Yeah, it's sort of it's the slave, but then it's also the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Because with it being the games and all that, and we're getting to a point with AI where AI, you can look. There's many articles where we put an AI on that they start programming themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's pretty scary to think about. Can that really happen? Some artificial intelligence we can make that's smart enough to start writing its own code.
Mm-hmm.
And like there was an article a few years back where Facebook had AI out, and it started making its own language with the other AIs, and they had to take it offline because they didn't know what it was doing because they couldn't crack the code.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa!
Mm-hmm.
Wait, you mean we can make something that intelligent?
Oh yeah.
That's another episode. All right, I think this is a good point to stop.
Oh, absolutely. I think that good episode, good topics. Hope you guys out there got something out of this. I realize I got kind of preachy there at the end, but as you can see, we're very passionate about people just asking questions. You have to ask why in everything, and if you don't, I guarantee you, one day you're going to wake up and you're going to begin to say, why am I here?
Yep.
What have I done? Go out there, promote your own free thinking, promote your own free thought, promote your own self-education and self-development, and try to do that in others too, because I really think that we as humans have a lot more potential than we give ourselves credit for.
Oh, look in our past.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we can do incredible things, but we have to find a way to get out of this mentality that we're in. So I hope you guys get something out of this. Go out there and do some research and ask some questions. And we thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any comments on this episode, any questions, any video suggestions, anything like that, leave it down below in the comments. Hit that like button. Give us some support. We appreciate it. You have a good one.
Yep. Camera on. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and then the little bell to get notified.
Also, don't forget to like and share our content so that we can get this out there. If you guys have any questions that you want answered, or you have any suggestions for a video topic, please feel free to put that in the comments below.